Hey, Rick, what did you eat last night?
I had ice cream. That's it, really.
That was it?
Yes.
What kind?
It was the Ben & Jerry's kind, and it's the one that has it's mint chocolate cookie. So it's basically mint ice cream with I think it's Oreo shoved into it. I was just, because I hadn't had anything, I didn't have any food in my kitchen, and I didn't want to prepare anything, so I stopped at the grocery store because I'm like, I'll just pick up something prepared, which I guess technically I did.
You did. Yeah. Yeah. If you don't specify, that's what happened.
So that was me. And then, of course, I just collapsed onto the couch. I'm like, well, that wasn't good. How about you?
I was at a Greek restaurant in Salt Lake City, actually, and I had this really delicious dish called bureki, which is a traditional Cretan dish. It's like a little casserole. It's zucchini and potatoes layered with feta and some homemade cheese that they said is similar to ricotta, and it's baked in a clay pot.
Oh, nice.
And it was just so well balanced. I think there was a little mint in there, maybe some lemon, and it just had a really delicious texture and flavor balance. It was really, really, really yummy.
Oh, wow. Sweet. Welcome to another episode of You Won't Believe What I Ate Last Night. I am Rick Fiore.
And I'm Kate DeVore.
And this is our ongoing conversation about food, health, weight management, and our endeavor to be and stay healthy in a really tasty world.
With love, kindness, and compassion towards ourselves and others.
Today we are talking about salt, its history, its effect on our body, and its effect on food.
Yay, salt.
Yay, salt. Kate, so this is actually great, a topic, because it's going to allow me to ask you a question that I've been wanting to ask you for like pretty much our whole friendship.
Okay.
Do you like salt?
Well, I usually don't talk about it much, but yes.
Interesting, because all these years I've never heard that word even come out of your mouth.
Yes, I am a fan of the salt. I'm going to start calling you names that have to do with that. Like I'm going to call you Old Salt.
Old Salt.
Salt of the earth. Right, Old Salt.
Salty McSalt.
That's Salty McSalt. That's it. Yeah. So I love the salt. So we're going to start by talking about the history of salt. So it comes from either the sea or from mines, so sea salt or mined salt. We have used it for thousands of years, and it was actually one of the major contributors to civilization, which I've learned a lot of interesting things on this as I was looking into this, actually. So the very earliest known town in Europe was built around a salt production facility.
Don't you love that idea?
Yeah. It's because it was such a valuable commodity because it was the first thing that enabled people to preserve food. And so people weren't bound to a location. They were able to ship food, lots of food over long periods of time because it took a long time to ship things places. And so it wouldn't rot on the way. And so it enabled a lot of trade. It enabled people to not necessarily be seasonal and have to eat what they find right there.
It also allowed people to have power, which is one of the things I really realized. Some guy I was watching was talking about how he relates it to powder keg, or what is it? Powder for the powder kegs, like to gunpowder. Yes, like that's how big of an invention or a discovery it was because it gave people complete power over other civilizations. Yeah, which I thought was really interesting.
Totally. The sentence I liked was it created and destroyed empires and cities. Like that is huge.
That's a History Channel show if I've ever heard it.
There is one. There has to be. The number of websites devoted to salt, like I had no idea until we started doing this episode and looking into it. There's all these roads that are named after salt. There's, because of the trade, like the Silk Road, where there was the silk trade. It's the same idea, but it was the salt trade.
Yeah. And going back to one of the first things you said, I love this idea how communities would come around wherever it was, primarily maybe by the sea in the beginning. And this whole idea that it's such a foster a community. It's just a foster in a weird way of people coming together and gathering around and creating community around salt. I sort of love that idea so much.
That's a very sweet perspective.
Isn't it?
Mine is a little more mercenary, like it's where the money was, and so it's where the jobs were.
Go for it.
And so it was just completely practical. But both things are true.
Oh, no, Kate. I'm sure those jobs they were well paying. I'm sure they involved no risk.
Definitely not slaves.
No.
In the salt mines, definitely not.
Sure, it was unionized.
Yeah. Okay. So here is the single most shocking thing that I learned doing the research for this episode. Are you ready?
Yeah.
So I have always been taught that the word salary comes from the same root as the word salt, and that is because Roman soldiers were paid in salt, that's how valuable it is. Turns out there is no evidence to support that.
None, Kate.
And
I was shocked.
Apparently, 1 pound of salt in Roman times cost approximately 1/20th of a foot soldier's daily wages. So
that is tough.
Wasn't like yes, it was valuable, but the value that we place on it historically is largely because the trade was so big, because they were trading huge quantities of it, and it was an important commerce thing. It wasn't that having salt at your home was like nobody had it and it was such a big deal you got paid in it.
Right.
So I was a little disappointed, frankly, to learn that, because I always liked the idea that that's where worth your salt comes from and all of that stuff, and it's apparently just not true.
Agreed. The closest that I came is that sometime Roman soldiers were given salt as like an accompaniment to their wages, but never their entire wages. And the other thing that salt is worth its weight in gold is another sort of phrase that we've come away with too, which just isn't true, obviously, because of the very reason that you just said. The other thing I love is this idea that they had to move salt from where it was to where it wasn't. And then that how just opened up all those wonderful trading routes, and how from there people would just move out. They would spread out with it. And it was this idea of just like taking this really great commodity, because it was really one of the first great commodities that civilizations started trading in and trading with.
Yeah, because I mean, food, everything else was, there was textiles, there was silk, there were other things that were really important. But really food, you need the food. Everything comes to food.
The importance of salt in preserving food in relation to armies being able to travel longer distances to be able to conquer more.
Yes.
That's sort of cool, but not really.
Right. Well, given that that's what they were doing. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I guess soldiers were given a grain allowance also. And so a lot of times the term for the money they were paid was basically like a generic term for everything other than the grain. And so that might be where the salary came from. Like it was sort of a metaphor for everything else, your salt and your whatever, your fruit or, whatever, your fish.
Right.
Here was another little thing that I didn't know, which was also fun. The word salad means salted. And it came from the Romans salting leafy vegetables because, of course, that makes them far more delicious.
I love that reference. Now, other words I found came from salt, but I didn't really bother to look them up. I heard salsa. Did you hear that?
No.
I know, right? And what was the other one? Sausage.
Well, I didn't read that, but it certainly makes sense, although I don't know the etymology of that word. But I know that when we talk about the effect of salt on food, I know that it's certainly necessary for sausage.
Yeah, and pork was one of the first things that they used.
Yeah, for the color and the texture and the binding and the flavor. So all of it.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, so that's pretty much what I have on the history. Do you have anything else?
No, and just that whole thing about before refrigeration came in, I've already said this, just how fascinated I am with the power it represented. It really related to survival. It really meant that you didn't have to be seasonal on anything. Yeah, all that stuff. I just love that whole idea.
Fascinating.
Hey, did you know?
Hey, Kate, did you know that the Dunkin' Donuts in South Korea offers donut flavors such as kimchi croquette and glazed garlic?
Oh my God. No.
Can we please go to South Korea?
Wow. If anybody has tried one of those, please tell us how it is.
Please.
All right. So let's talk about how it affects the body.
Here's what I know. It's vital for human life. That's what I discovered. I knew it was important, but I didn't quite get.
Really? That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I always knew, but the whole idea. And the other thing I knew is, I guess I didn't really, this is so silly. I didn't really put the combination together of salt and its need for water and how that would relate to weight gain. So that's sort of something maybe I knew it, but it was sort of fun to rediscover that.
What do you mean?
Is that the idea when you have lots of salt in the body? So salt naturally is attracted to water. You're going to absorb more water and put on more weight, because I think the whole idea is when sodium attracts water like a sponge, right? So it increases fluid in the body. It strains the heart and the kidneys, increasing blood pressure. So the whole body has to work a little bit harder. So there's less circulation, there's less metabolism. So I think the whole idea is that you put on more weight.
You're talking about an excess of salt, I think, because, I mean,
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
It would be an excess.
Yeah, maybe. Right. It does make us retain the fluid. Certainly. You get bloated and all that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was sort of fun to learn.
Yeah.
Or put together, I should say.
Yeah. So it's considered essential because we need it to function, as you said. And then also because we can't make it. Our bodies can't make it. So that's one of the reasons it's so valuable is we can't produce it ourselves and we absolutely desperately need it. And isn't it fortunate that our planet happens to be rife with it?
Rife. They literally say, we have so much of it and we recycle it.
Yeah, totally. So, that's obviously how we adapted because we can get it easily enough from the earth.
And maybe you know more about this, but I was reading this whole thing about how it's an electrolyte and it helps the nerve muscles to function correctly. It's it's the one factor, that it's what allows all the muscles and the brain and the muscles and the nerves to send messages back and forth to the brain.
Yep. It regulates nerve impulses, muscle contraction, the heartbeat, protein digestion, our ability to absorb nutrients, regulate fluid. So that's if you have the right amount of salt, you're not bloated, you're not retaining water, you're regulating your fluid in your body and your organs and stuff. Digestion and even breathing. It allows the blood to carry the carbon dioxide from other parts of your body into your lungs so that you can exhale it. So it even affects your ability to breathe.
Salt, I love you.
I know, right? And the average human body contains about 8 ounces of salt.
I was surprised. I don't know why I thought it would be more.
I know, right? It doesn't seem like very much.
It doesn't. Particularly for something that it doesn't make on its own.
Yeah, half a pound. Half a pound of salt. Yeah. And we, a lot of times our salt is iodized, right? Your Morton's salt, your traditional table salt is iodized because that protects against mental retardation because apparently before we started putting iodine in the salt, iodine deficiency was the leading cause of little kids being born with or developing mental retardation because they didn't have enough iodine.
Really?
Yes.
I am just shocked.
I know. And apparently putting iodine in the salt and eating it when you're pregnant and having, your kids eat it like solves that. It's amazing.
Jeez, who knew?
And it affects thyroid also, like iodine. So that's why, It's amazing. It's like fluoride in the toothpaste, I guess, right?
Do you ever feel like when you eat too much salt, can you feel it in your body? How does it show up for you?
Well, I'm thirsty, for one. Definitely I'm thirsty. And I feel bloated. I would say a little sausagey, a little bloaty.
A little sausagey.
Yeah. How about you?
I was going to say, I would not have said bloated, but I would have said definitely dehydrated, definitely. And I tend to think, it's so many times when I eat it late at night, if I eat something really salty at night, I really feel it. Like in the middle of the night, I just have to get up and sort of replenish.
Mm-hmm. And drink that water because your cells are holding on to it because of what you were describing.
Yes.
So here was another absolutely fascinating thing that I learned is, the party line has always been that too much salt causes high blood pressure. Well, apparently that's not true either. That both the American Journal of Hypertension and the British medical journal, The Lancet, which is like their biggest, most prestigious medical journal, both have articles that say, there's a very, very small amount of blood pressure decrease when you decrease your salt and increase when you increase it. That the biggest culprit for hypertension and heart disease is, do you know? Not salt, but
sugar?
Yes, good. Especially fructose, but yes, sugar. So we're going to do a whole nother podcast on sugar, you guys, because there's a lot to say about that too. But yeah.
Because what I've been told, you would think that salt was the end all to be all to solve hypertension. From everything I've ever been told.
I thought that until yesterday. Until I looked this up. I was stunned and I was following the rabbit hole of resources, of references. They're like, there's no evidence to suggest this. And then they have a reference and I'm like, let me read that article because I don't believe you. But sure enough, they all led to actual viable journal articles in legit journals that there is no strong evidence that cutting salt intake reduced the risk of heart attacks or strokes. In fact, reducing salt levels to the levels recommended by the U.S. government can cause harm and decrease life expectancy.
Bummer. Let me tell you something, Kate, between this and the whole soldiers not being paid in salt, my mind is blown today.
I know. It's true. I wasn't expecting to be so completely stunned by my research into salt.
Next thing you're going to tell me that global warming doesn't exist anymore.
Hang on. Let me just open the window here in Chicago in February since it's in the 70s. I'll get back to you on that. So yeah, sugar, not salt, causes high blood pressure and heart disease far more. Too little salt. Did you see any of that about what the effects on your body of not enough salt
No,
are?
I didn't.
Yeah. So if you don't have
no,
enough
I'm sorry,
salt,
I did. I was reading that it's. No, I didn't. I lied on that one.
All right, liar. So it's that it increases the bad cholesterol if you don't have enough salt. It increases insulin resistance, which leads to obesity and diabetes. And if you already have type 2 diabetes, if you don't have enough salt, it's a serious, serious problem that can lead to death because of how it affects your insulin.
Good Lord. I did read that this has really surprised me that a high consumption of salt has been linked to a greater excretion of calcium in urine, which can relate to bone thinning. And I thought that was really fascinating because I have osteopenia, which is like, it's one step that's really close to have osteoporosis. So I'm like, good to know. And then so I'm like, good thing I haven't been consuming a whole lot of salt because, you know me, I like salt, but I'm always like, a little bit goes a long way for me.
Well, and that's what it is. My favorite thing I read in all these things about like how many milligrams you need and all that stuff, because there's a lot of debate about how many. One of them was eat real food, put as much salt as you need to make it taste good, and that's it. Because the majority of our salt intake that's problematic is coming from processed food, not from the food we're cooking at home, and certainly not from plants.
Yeah. And that's sort of interesting. That goes back to the history of salt, is that animals have far more salt in their bodies than we do. So we were getting so much of our salt when we were killing animals and eating animals. And then when sort of the agricultural thing came on board and we're creating more plants and eating more plants, we actually stopped getting salt. So there's this correlation of when that whole sort of agricultural industry came on, we had to start consuming more and more salt.
That's interesting. That makes sense. Meat has a lot more sodium than vegetables. I didn't think about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I forget the amount, but all meat generally just has far more meat in their lining everywhere.
Right, because vegetables and fruit have very, very little natural sodium. I read a whole bunch of stats about how much we're supposed to have, but the basic thing that I think I saw the most frequently was approximately 1 teaspoon of salt per day, which is 6 grams. But then another thing said it was 1 to 2 teaspoons. Another one said it was half a teaspoon. So like it was a pretty broad thing. But I think about a teaspoon is the ballpark that they recommend.
When I was reading how the health agencies are recommending a daily intake of about 2,400 milligrams, which is what you said is about a teaspoonful. But they said in general, most Americans consume 3,300 per day. That's the average.
Yeah, about 1.5 times what is recommended. Yeah. Right. But then some people say, actually, that higher amount is fine for you. It's a little bit like, you know, how eggs were villainized for a while because if you eat eggs, you're going to have all this cholesterol because eggs have cholesterol in them and it will raise your cholesterol. And then they were like, actually, that's not how it works. While the eggs do have intrinsic cholesterol, eating them does not give you high cholesterol.
Yes, there's
so
no
they were no longer
yeah.
being demonized. And so I think there's some similar thinking about that around salt, is that it's not as bad for our bodies as it has been as people have been led to believe.
Free salt, free salt.
Free salt. So that being said, we still need to sort of obviously keep it in check. But I mean, I have a friend, bless his heart, who will cook the blandest food in the world, and he'll eat this whole pot of food for like 3 weeks that he'll put like no salt in because his doctor said to limit his salt. But then he'll eat a burger and fries without batting an eye, and doesn't understand that that's 10 times as much salt as one serving of normal home cooked food would be if you salted it properly.
Crazy.
Yeah.
But funny.
Yeah.
And I understand him.
Yeah. Well, I will say I've given him enough grief about it over the years that he's heard me. So at least now he salts his food properly.
There must be more salting.
Yeah. So that's what I have on that. Anything else in that section for you before we move on to its effect on food?
Good. I'm good. Actually, for just one second, actually, Janice just stepped in. She's our producer. She just handed me this piece of paper. And, you know, right this week, Janice is with me here in Washington, D.C., so Kate doesn't know about this. But for those of you who don't know, Kate loves games. She loves puzzles, right? Uh-huh. You're sort of into them.
I do. I love them.
We've actually prepared a multiple choice quiz for Kate.
Yay! Games!
Now, I'm going to see Kate in a couple weeks. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 questions. So if you get all 4 questions right,
yes,
I will pick you up at the airport.
Okay.
All right.
All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All
If you get 3 right, I'll pay for your Uber from the airport. If you get 2 right, you're going to have to pay for your own Uber from the airport. And then if you only get 1 right, I don't know what's going to happen.
What if I don't get any right?
Well, I hope we get our work done.
I just shouldn't get on the plane, I guess, basically.
No.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right. So here's your first question.
All right. I'm nervous now. There's pressure.
I'm going to put it on you, Kate, because the thing is, Kate knows that I don't like puzzles. I don't like games.
Yeah.
But I'm more than willing to have her do them.
Okay. I'll take it.
So your first question. Salt is naturally attracted to water. Is the word for this attraction A, galvanoscopic, B, hygroscopic, or C, laryngoscopic?
B.
Very good.
Hydro is the prefix for water. Thank you.
I thought you'd pick that up.
Yay. Okay. Shwoo. All right. I can get on the plane at least.
Very good. All right. Your second question. In preparing for this episode, how much time of his life did Rick lose to watching clips of the 2010 Angelina Jolie movie Salt? A, 45 minutes. B, 1 hour, or C, an hour and a half.
Oh, no. A.
No, it's B, an hour.
Oh, no.
Which is rich, because I think the movie's only like 70 minutes. I could have just rewatched the whole movie. I was going to say,
like, that's the whole movie right there then.
But that's crazy. All right. You ready for your third question?
Yes.
Okay. If all of the salt were removed from the ocean and spread evenly over the earth, it would create a layer how many feet thick?
Fascinating.
A, 200 feet.
Wow.
B, 350 feet. C, 500 feet.
Oh my gosh. I have absolutely no idea, but that is such an interesting question.
Do you want to phone a friend?
I'd like to ask the studio audience. If somebody out there knows, it's driving you crazy, I know. I'm going to say C.
Very good. Yay! 500 feet.
Wow.
It would create a layer 500 feet thick. Isn't that interesting?
500 feet thick of salt around the whole earth. So this is one of those things. That's why no one's talking about salt shortages, obviously. Like, we aren't running out of that. That's awesome. Okay, fun.
Yeah. And on that, there's all these other talks about how can we use salt as the new power source since it's so plentiful. All right. Here's your final question, Kate.
All right. I'm ready.
And finally, which gospel can the term salt of the earth be found in? A, the Gospel of Luke. B, the Gospel of Matthew. Or C, the Gospel of Ralph.
Ralph?
It was one of the lost gospels that the church is sort of keeping hidden.
Okay. Matthew.
Very good. Very good. You've done so well. I'll still pick you up at the airport.
I believe it's New Testament Matthew 5:13, in fact.
Very good.
I'm definitely not looking at Wikipedia to find that out.
No, she goes to Mass. That's where she knows it from.
That's right. From all my times at Mass. Well, that was fun. Thank you.
Yay.
All right. And your gift is I won't make you answer a quiz question.
Thank God.
Totally.
Did you know? Hey, Kate, did you know that the most expensive pizza in the world in 2015 cost $12,000 and takes 72 hours to make?
What was on that?
I'm glad you asked. It's topped with buffalo mozzarella, 3 types of caviar, lobster from Norway, and is lightly dusted with hand-picked grains of pink Australian sea salt from the Murray River. The cost includes service, thank God, and this pie can only be made in your house. That's right. 3 Italian chefs have to show up at your house to make it for you in the comfort of your kitchen.
Wow. That's one of those things that I think no matter how wealthy I was, there's no way in the world that would be on the list of things I did.
Agreed.
All right. Effects on food. It's got a lot. Well, obviously, we talked about the preservative effect. So it kills microbes. Right. It keeps things fresh. It never goes bad, pretty much.
And the big thing you've always taught me, which is the biggest thing I learned from you, is it brings out, whenever you use it in cooking, it brings out the natural flavor. that it has no taste really, and it brings out the natural flavor of food.
Yes, exactly. So salt apparently is one of the 5 flavors that we identify: salt, sour, sweet, bitter, umami. So we do like salty as a flavor, but then it also has this quality that even if something doesn't taste salty, which typically we don't want it to taste salty, but it affects the molecules in other foods that brings out their natural flavors. It makes them burst. It makes them more prone to air, which affects the aroma. And the aroma is a big part of how we taste things.
It's super important in fermentation. And one of my favorite food, pickles.
Yeah, right? Pickles are super salty. It affects texture, particularly in bread, cheese, and processed meat. And it also sometimes acts as a crunch. So that's really obvious on something like a pretzel, like a big, a pretzel where they have little big salt things on it. But, there's Malden salt, which is in flake form, and you put it on as a finishing salt. And now we have all these super fancy finishing salts that have different textures, ranging from flakes to little tiny grains to giant chunks, so that you actually get like a real pop of salt every now and then in the middle of your meal.
I was going to say buying salt has become a lot like buying olive oil. You just go there and you just have to stand in front of the 1,000 of choices you have. And I'm so overwhelmed by which one to get. And am I going to get the right one?
I have a little salt sampler that somebody gave me years ago that probably has 25 little tiny baby containers of different kinds of salt. And I've been using it this whole time and I still have it. Like it lasts a long time.
That's
a little
great.
pinch of finishing salt goes a long way, but a little bit on your veggies or your chicken or your salad. It's amazing what a difference a little coarse salt, especially some of that fancier salt, can have.
Yeah, totally.
It can intensify sweetness and reduce bitterness. So the whole sea salt caramel, salted chocolate thing that's gotten all trendy, like there always has to be salt in dessert. Like, your classic Toll House chocolate chip cookies have salt. Like you have to have salt in a sweet thing. But now people are putting a lot more of it because it brings out the sweet and cuts the bitterness of chocolate and things like grapefruit.
One of the things I was thinking you might be able to talk a little, or, this is what I was watching this thing about the tongue, and I was learning all this stuff about the tongue, and I know you know about the tongue, but I was reading how the tongue, obviously it has taste buds, and all these little taste buds, they're made of sort of individual cells. And at the tip of each cell is this receptor, which can be open to different flavors. And there's actually, there's a very specific channel that allows salt through.
I don't know that.
Just one specifically for salt. I thought, isn't that interesting? It allows it to register in the brain, which is why they say it tends to make such a difference when we add it to food, because we're so able to notice it and receive it.
Is there a comparable channel for sweet and bitter and the other ones? Do you know?
Not that I read. They were also saying that a long time they used to think that salt, you had to put it on the tip of the tongue to taste it. But now they're saying it's the whole tongue, that's no longer correct. Yeah,
that's what I was going to say. One thing I can say about the taste buds is indeed that it used to be believed that there were regions of the tongue for tasting different tastes. And I can't imagine why I never understood that, because I was always like, nah, just empirically. I was like, that is clearly not true in my own mouth. And indeed, totally. No, all the taste buds do all the tasting. So There is no region like that. Yeah.
And there's taste buds all over the tongue, are there not?
Yeah, totally. Even down the back of your throat a little bit.
Oh, wow.
So it affects color. It obviously affects flavor. Texture is what I was going to say, but it also can affect color in some things, particularly processed meats like your sausages, your salami, those kinds of things.
This is a little off topic, but did you know that prosciutto is the past tense of the verb prosciugare, which means to dry out?
No.
In Italian.
So prosciutto just literally means dried out?
Yeah. It's the past.
It sounds so much better in Italian.
I was so unimpressed.
I would like a melon wrapped in dried out, please.
Totally.
That's interesting. Do you know the difference between kosher salt and table salt, if you see that in a recipe?
I've seen them in recipes. Kosher salt, now isn't kosher salt thicker?
It's coarser, yes.
Coarser, thicker, and it takes longer to break down from what I know in recipes. Is that correct? That's a good question.
It's not going to take that much longer. I mean, it might take longer, but it's still pretty much instantaneous if you put it in something boiling or something. It's basically double the size of your Morton's table salt. And so that's important, because if a recipe calls for kosher salt and it calls for a teaspoon of kosher salt and you're not using kosher salt, you're using regular table salt, you should cut that in half. That's why it's
that.
important. And if it calls for table salt and you're using kosher salt, then you should double it.
Oh, wow. Okay, good tip, Kate DeVore.
So thank you. So, and kosher salt tends not to have iodine, which by the time we're adults, I don't think we need the iodine in our salts in our salt anymore. So it doesn't, we don't need that nutrient from that, or mineral or whatever it is from there. So it's fine. But it is the preference of chefs nowadays. But I think older recipes, like if you have any grandma's recipes lying around, they were probably talking about table salt. And I think most modern day recipes that are created like now, if they don't specify, I would believe they mean kosher salt, because I always mean kosher salt in my recipes, and I just don't even say it. And I think that's often the case.
Do you really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. See, all these years as friends. It's good to learn something.
That's right. And popcorn salt is just regular salt that's ground up even finer so that it can adhere to the popcorn.
Nice. I was thinking about one of the few times that I really, really sort of adore a lot of salt is when I have watermelon and I put salt right over that watermelon. That's one of the few times that it really registers with me in a really strong way. And it really brings out the flavor of like a very flavorless, food, basically.
Yeah, it just brings out the sweet. And oh my gosh, I'm salivating at the idea of watermelon with salt on it with a little mint. Maybe some feta cheese. Oh, my goodness. Which is very salty, of course. Fleur de sel is a very pricey French salt. It literally means flower of the salt. And it is the very, very top crystals. So it's created by kind of getting a pan, like I don't know how they do it, but a bucket or whatever, a sheet pan of the salt water, and letting it evaporate. And it just leaves the salt crystals there. And then the very, very top of the salt crystals apparently is the saltiest of the salt. And so that's the fleur de sel. So it's pricey. And I really can taste a difference. The first time I used it, I dipped a hard-boiled egg in it. And I was like, oh, my God, I used the same amount I would normally use of salt. And it was way, way over the top.
Wow. My mouth is so open right now because I'm so stunned with the information you presented, which I did not find.
Oh, I didn't find that. I just knew that.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Because I like salt and I like to cook. I know these things. Yes, exactly.
Totally.
Yeah. And probably my mother,
Curse you and your mother.
I know, totally. But I also learned that there's no point in dissolving it in anything, because once it dissolves, then it's just salt.
Right.
And so
yes, totally.
Yeah, it's a finishing salt again. So that's why those are expensive. Okay. So never use a finishing salt just in a dish.
Oh,
well, you
funny.
can. It works.
Saying.
It's just a waste of money.
Right. That's intense. God, a little bit of salt goes a long way, baby.
That is a perfect way to end it. Agreed. All right. So anything else?
I just want to say, remember, throw salt over your shoulder if you want to ward off any devils.
Right. We forgot to talk about the importance of salt in devil warding off.
That's what Kate and I do. We do a lot of it.
I believe it's your left shoulder with your right hand. That's right. All right. Well, we'll take it with a grain of salt.
That was good.
We won't throw salt in the wound. And we hope that we were worth our salt on this podcast.
And we hope we were not too salty with you.
All right. So you know the drill. Please follow us on YouTube and SoundCloud and iTunes. You won't believe what I ate last night.
Our website is youwon'tbelievewhatIate.com.
You can email us through there. You can send us thoughts and questions. You can send us recordings of thoughts and questions and information. You can also post that to our Facebook page.
Our Instagram account is You Won't Believe What I Ate if you want to follow us there. And of course, if you have any thoughts or questions, you can email us at youwon'tbelievewhatIate@gmail.com. And as always, thank you so much for listening. And this podcast is truly supported by the awesome people such as yourself. So if you want to make a donation, you can do that on our website, youwon'tbelievewhatIate.com. Thanks so much for listening.
Bye.